Immigration, migration, the concept of moving from one place to another. Humans do it, other animals do it. It is the process of movement. And there seems to be infinite reasons as to why humans specifically move from one place to another. As civilizations have advanced and developed over the years, many have created stipulations, requirements, purposes for individuals to travel from one place to another, to relocate, if you will. The United States being no different. For its existence, this country has routinely adopted new policies towards immigration. Who can come into the nation? How do we declare you as a citizen? What is it that you need to do to be able to show that you belong in the United States? This is nothing new inside this country. This is a repetitive process that has taken place for quite literally centuries. Most time it's been met with ideas of scrutiny and with a microscopic lens in the sake of how do you determine who's allowed and who isn't. It's really come to a head in recent years when working with individuals who are coming from other countries inside the United States, whether this be in the form of travel bans, whether this be border patrol security, whether this be homeland security. There's so many different aspects and pieces as to immigration in the United States. The important thing to remember is it's not just in recent years. The United States has had a long history of trying to understand its position when dealing with immigration or migration, either way. Ranging from how do we deal with the influx of Irish refugees coming in from the famine-stricken island of Ireland, to the mass influx of Germans prior to the World Wars, to Eastern Europeans coming in after the World Wars and after the collapse of the Soviet Union, plus influxes through Latin America, and also consistent themes of people coming to the United States, even from like the continent of Africa, for many different reasons historically. So the question for you, future leaders of this world, future leaders of this country, is what is it, or what are the next steps the United States should take when adopting policies towards immigration? Should we be more strict? Should we be looser? Should we do nothing? These are all common questions that the government handles every single day, sometimes without answers, frequently without answers. One of the consistencies when we look at immigration, though, is to look at themes. Themes as to why people move from one place to another, and themes as what does the government that the individual is moving to, how do they react to that? We know collectively inside the United States that there's a lot of tendencies of individuals inside the country to make comments about immigrants or people immigrating into the United States. However, one thing still consists to be true. Millions of people consistently attempt to move to the United States. Why? What about the other options in the world? What about all these other countries? Why is it the United States? Even as an instructor, I can sit inside a classroom and I can listen to students frequently share their opinions about this place they call home, and many of the negative thoughts and ideas and problems associated with it, all of which are fair. And in the end, though, when the sun sets and the new day starts, there's still people coming to the United States. Why? Why is it the United States? Why pick this country? Why choose the country that's full of wilderness, full of a very unique people group, full of a very questionable history of both very good things and very bad things? Why the United States? And the other question is, how has the United States reacted to that? Do we pick who should come in and who shouldn't? Do we choose someone based on what country they're from, whether or not we accept them or not? Make no mistake, we put bans, historically, we've put bans on full countries, full ethnic groups of saying you're not welcomed into the United States. That's a reality that we have to own. The Chinese Exclusion Act would be a very good example. How we treated Japanese Americans after World War II is another very good example. Without say, how we handled individuals coming in from the Middle East after 2001. a very good example. There's so many examples of how we've filtered or changed or redesigned our policies when it comes to immigration. My challenge for you when we're analyzing this and we're seeing all these different people groups is to look at the patterns and to see, one, why people come to the United States, and two, how the government reacts. How we react as a people group today, is it reflective to how people reacted 20 years ago, 50 years ago, 100 years ago? Many would argue that the answer would be a resounding yes, that the United States has reacted very similarly, just to different groups of people. We tend historically to look at specific ethnic groups or geographical groups and isolate them as to this specific group cannot come in, this specific group can come in. So the question to that is, well, why? Why do we pick one group versus the other? Why do we, for example, allow Europeans, individuals from Europe, access to the United States? I'm not saying easier or harder, versus an individual coming in from Latin America, or the influx of individuals coming from India or China. Like, there's so many different pieces that we have to juggle all at the same time. Like, why are we picking this group as being more important than this group? And is it justifiable? I don't really know. That's why we learn this stuff. That's why we dig into it, just to try to understand the bigger picture. And I can tell you, as an individual whose family's been here for centuries, like, it's hard. It was hard originally to really allow that to resonate within me about this idea of who can come in and who can't, because it never impacted me. Now, sitting here in a classroom where so many of my students or so many of their families are immigrants to the United States, it creates a very different perspective. And it does cause me to question and ask the question as to why. Why do we choose who can come in and who can't? So that's the piece to really struggle with a little bit. It's not so much to look at the charts and go, oh, cool, here's how many people came in from this country. Here's how many people came in from this country. We can look at that. We can analyze that. We can make conclusions about that. Like, oh, there was a war in this country on this specific year, so people naturally left. Makes sense. But what we really probably should take a closer look at is within our own government, the people we elect, what are the patterns that they've demonstrated when interacting with people groups who are not specifically designated as American citizens? Historically, we could make a valid argument that the Indian Removal Act and the Trail of Tears isn't, to an extent, could be seen as an immigration policy or a migrant policy, because of the fact that we're relocating people across the United States from their own nations. Don't forget, groups like the Cherokee and the Crow and the Sioux and the Seminole, they all had their own independent sovereign nations recognized by the U.S. government. So if we're forcibly moving them from one place to another, could we make a similar argument for that? Something to consider. Immigration is truly a piece of information that, one, makes up the American identity. The United States would not be the United States without the influx of immigrants through its entire history. We are, to a lot of terms, a melting pot. We take all these people that have come together and from all these different backgrounds and mix them together into one country, and somehow we get along, or at least we're supposed to get along, right? Makes it a little more interesting. It's important to recognize that the United States thrives off immigrants. So it's kind of a weird perspective. On one hand, we have so many individuals within our own government, within our own body of citizens, that are so adamantly against loose immigration policy, like allowing people in consistently. We have a lot of people who are very vocal about this not being appropriate. But at the same time, when we look at the makeup of the United States historically, like its people, we come to realize very quickly that we wouldn't be anything without immigrants. So which one takes the higher priority? I don't really know. If we look at electricity, we know Edison gets a lot of grace for all that he did, when in reality, majority of it came from Nikola Tesla, who, by the way, was an immigrant. Or what about Einstein, theory of relativity, nuclear weapons, things along those lines? All that concept, like, don't forget, Einstein was an immigrant. So a lot of people who have contributed so many great things to the American system originated somewhere else before they came here. But now we look at what they've done historically, the impacts they've brought to the United States, and then we're like, well, we wouldn't be anything without them. So we can make an argument that immigrants are pretty darn important. I don't know. What do you think? How do we handle an immigration policy? What's important? What's not important? And what's the impact of either allowing immigrants in without a lot of restrictions? And what's the impacts of severe restrictions or significant restrictions of allowing people in? It's something to consider because this is not a social studies topic, like a textbook topic. This is a real world topic that impacts us on an everyday basis. So just something to consider. Where do you stand when it comes to immigration? And once you figure that out, why?